What up, comics lovers of all shapes and sizes? Sorry again for the noise from the goddamn ceiling fan. I'm still trying to figure out why the remote won't work. I've been researching it online and it sounds like it's probably become unsynced from the control box that's actually inside the ceiling in the fan. So at this point, I'll have to go down, turn off some circuit breakers and fuck around or whatever. So I gotta wait for a day where I have nothing to do and it's very bright and sunny, which right now we're in the middle of winter, so not the greatest times, but it's not a big deal right now other than when I'm doing these videos. But in the summertime, when I might need it on at night when I'm sleeping so I don't melt my ass off, I'll need to find a way to have the fan on and the light off. So it'll become a little more imperative come springtime. So for now we're stuck with it, but I will eventually get my ass on the case. But anyways, we're here for December's comic books. And boy, oh boy, let me tell you, this was a fun month because there was a little bit of everything and there was also something extra. I noticed when I went in either October or November, I don't remember which month, I noticed on the counter they always have flyers and free books to take and other information, and I noticed a certain comic book that had just come out from a character that's been around for a long time that I loved as a kid, as more, I guess, a teenager, young teenager, and it's kind of been revived. A new comic book series has come out, but they didn't have any in the store at the time because the book's done by a very more indie company, and so they don't always get a lot of copies of those, if any at all. So they were like, oh, we'll get it for you, we'll order it for you. So I came for my December comics and they had the first 2 issues for me. So these comics in question are issues number 1 and number 2 of The Toxic Avenger. So the story behind this, issue 1 starts off with it kind of works backwards a little bit. It starts off on quarantine day 4, and we're introduced to a character named Melvin, who has transformed into this green, oozing mutant that has super strength. And we learn as they count back through the quarantine days that Melvin was kind of an outcast in high school. He wore a tutu around, and he was sarcastic, and he was kind of weird. And so naturally all the jocks and the cool kids thought he was a freak and picked on him and stuff. So him and his friend Yvonne were hanging out at the, what are they called? Junkyard? Yeah, the junkyard. After high school one day, after he'd been picked on by some people after an assembly where he kind of got a little crazy. And so I'm always so tired when I do my comics videos. I don't know why. But anyways, these punks, Pluto and Bryce and some other kids came after Melvin and Yvonne at the junkyard, and they dumped some shit on them. So they kind of push Yvonne out of the way, and they're after Melvin. So Melvin makes tracks, he beats it, and he makes it to the train tracks where a train's coming down the tracks, and it crashes, and it's full of all this toxic ooze, and all the kids get covered in it, and that's why they become mutated. So after this incident happens, the mayor and some, and this is some small weird town in New Jersey. I don't know if it's real or not, or if it's made up, but the mayor and some girl, Lydia, her name is, she's brought in to kind of handle the situation, basically do a cover-up, calling it, there's nothing toxic there, Meanwhile, these kids are all freakish now, right? So the public is clamoring for the truth. They're like, how is it not toxic? Look at these kids. And where are all the other kids that were covered in this slime? Like, here's Melvin, but where are the rest? Where's my Bryce? Where's my whatever? So it's a big cover-up going on. And the one kid that was chasing Melvin, Pluto, is actually living at Melvin's house temporarily. His mutation didn't go as well as Melvin's. Melvin got all this super strength and shit, but Pluto's just basically a big blob of shit and is kind of useless. So he's really struggling with that. So as we shift to issue 2, we see this Lydia girl approach Melvin as kind of becoming like an ambassador, a liaison, as a mutant who had been transformed by this accident to kind of smooth things over with the public and say, hey, nothing bad happened. It's not so bad. Look at me. I'm a powerful mutant now, blah, blah, blah. So, but he turns it down, or is about to turn it down when Pluto, seeing this woman and in the front yard talking to Melvin, and he knows she's evil, he comes charging out of the house saying, where's my friends, bitch? And so then he takes off and goes on a rampage. So forces are mobilized to stop him. Melvin takes off after him to try and calm him down. In the end, Pluto, he starts taking out the members of this task force that are trying to catch him, kills a bunch of people, and he means to kill them, but he regrets it afterwards, and he can't kind of live with himself, so he's like, Melvin, just end it for me, right? So Melvin kind of climbs inside of Pluto somehow and like crushes his heart and kills him. After Pluto drinks all this toxic ooze and continues to get bigger and bigger, sort of thing. So that's where issue 2 ends, with Pluto just having died after Melvin did him a mercy. But right after that happens, there's all these people, the remaining forces led by Lydia, who are coming after Melvin to capture him after he basically turned down their offer to be their kind of mutant public liaison. So this is, the Toxic Avenger is a really cool character and a really cool story. I'm not sure. I think it came around after Ninja Turtles. There was lots of things that Ninja Turtles inspired. Like a lot of outfits jumped on the whole mutant bandwagon after the Ninja Turtles kind of became so popular. There was the Street Sharks. What else was there? There was a whole bunch of mutant stuff. And then, of course, the Toxic Avenger. And when I was in high school, YTV used to have the coolest cartoons. Not the regular mainstream ones, like G.I. Joe, Transformers, Ninja Turtles are like my favorite 3 cartoons of all time. But there are tons nipping at their heels that I love, like Mask, Robotech, Dungeons and Dragons, The Real Ghost, but there's hordes of them. But some of my favorite ones, which probably take the spots right after those big 3, are these weird, really weird cartoons that played on YTV in the early 90s that were so different and so under the radar that not a lot of people knew about them. There was Botsmaster, there was Bucky O'Hare, there was Cadillacs and Dinosaurs. There were so many cool cartoons. And a lot of them were either Canadian-American co-produced things or Canadian-French produced things. And I think that's why they were so under the radar, because they weren't mainstream American productions, right? Nobody gave them any fucking respect. But I watched these cartoons relentlessly, and one of the cartoons that was in this mix was called the Toxic Crusaders. So it was like a team of these mutant people that got transformed by this toxic waste, who then became advocates for cleaning up the world and fighting environmental pollution and taking people down that do that sort of thing. So there's a whole team of them led by the Toxic Avenger, and that was another cartoon that was on YTV in the early 90s, and I absolutely loved it. So the Toxic Avenger and the Toxic Crusaders are something that are kind of near and dear to my heart from my early teen years. Great years, great cartoons, great everything in the 90s, right? Especially that music. Next up, Void Rivals issue number 14. Now, let me see if I can remember everything here, because there's a lot going on in this issue. There's like all these different parties doing all these different things. So we have, if you remember on Zertonia in the last issue, there was like a priestess and some member of a council or something like that, and she was talking to him about unity and how it's actually a good thing, and he was against it. And now a brief little panel at the start of the issue with him basically accepting to follow her teachings and follow what she's gonna reveal to him about the truth of matters. Then we head to Agoria, where the council there are discussing matters when they are about how Unity is some people think it's good, but it actually brings about Goliant, which Goliant means the end of the universe, or the end of their worlds anyways. And nobody knows what Goliant is. He just mentions it before they're interrupted by one of their underlings saying, oh, there's some sort of a ship or object approaching the planet at deliberate speed. So then they go off to investigate. Then it shows Skuxoid, the little pig man from the Transformers cartoon, kind of sulking or having a crisis of conscience or something, sitting against something somewhere before he goes, wait, what am I doing? I got a wife and kids to provide for. And then he takes off. We don't know what he's up to. And then we also have, what was the other one? Oh, Pythona, the snake lady from G.I. Joe. They're investigating some sort of ship or something like that. And her and her compadre that she's doing this mission with, they find this weird organic looking ship, and they're investigating the outside of it. And they find some sort of weird green crystal lodged, and when they pull it out from where it's stuck, it kind of does a little blast. But they're okay afterwards. They don't really know what happened, but they've found something there that obviously is related to everything that's going on with Agoria and Zertonia. Then it goes back to Agoria, where they're starting to deal with this problem with this incoming object. And Derek volunteers to go check it out because he's one of their best pilots, and so he takes off up into the atmosphere with his ship. But all of a sudden, him and Salila develop some sort of mental connection where they're speaking together, kind of like Rey and Kylo Ren in Star Wars when they had those kind of mental conversations. It's kind of like that. So meanwhile, though, Derek is flying this ship, and he totally goes inert while he's in this connection with Salila. So he stops. He's basically just lying in his seat, off in La La Land somewhere. And same thing for Salila. She's trying to find Zerta and going deeper into the ring there. And she kind of shuts down too. And Handroid's like, what the fuck's going on? So they have a conversation about what kind of progress either of them are making. Neither has kind of gotten done what they wanted to get done. But then they start talking about, what was it? No, I can't remember. Yeah, they just talked about each of their missions and what was going on. I thought there was something more, but I don't think there is. So when they come back to themselves, Salila and Handroid continue to explore the environment they're in deep in this ring, and they come to a dead end. But then she's like, what? Like, what's the purpose of this dead end? And then she goes, oh, maybe the floor. And then all of a sudden the trapdoor opens up and they fall down. And that's kind of the last we see from her in this issue. Meanwhile, most of the rest of the action is with Derek and his ship. He comes into contact with this object that's coming in towards Agoria, and is immediately engaged, and some shooting starts. But Derek's like, I don't even know who this is. Like, I'm just going to power my guns down and try and do some fancy flying and convince this person that, I don't mean them any harm. Let's have a chat or whatever. That works out. And it turns out the person in this other ship is actually Hot Rod, the Transformer. And when they kind of talk and introduce themselves, Derek is like, I'm Derek from Zertonia, and Hot Rod is like, I'm Hot Rod from Cybertron, and Derek's like, Cybertron, you say? And that's that. And then after that, there's one last panel where the issue ends off. It's the Quintessons aboard one of their weird-looking screw ships, and they're like, excellent, things are going well, and they talk about something about the Ring of Zur or something like that. And they say it actually exists, so they're up to something. They've had some sort of revelation, obviously all related to all these intertwined events that are going on. And I'm assuming we're going to find out what that is, but there's so many different threads going on in this issue right now. I feel like I mentioned last time on issue 13, I'm like, I think we're very close to the conclusion of this story. I thought maybe we had 2-3 issues left in the series. I could be wrong, but that's my feeling. And this issue only helps strengthen that. I feel like all these different threads out there are starting to come together into one big knot where we're going to find out exactly what's going on, and everything will become, the big knot will become unraveled and the truth will be revealed. And obviously some sort of conclusion will be had to end this series. And I can't fucking wait, because I love the mix of Transformers, G.I. Joe, as well as some new characters from a whole different kind of aspect are mixed in with those two of my favorite franchises. So when I first started reading Void Rivals, I was like, yeah, it's okay. Because they put it in my bin at the comic book store, and I'm like, why is this in here? Like, this is nothing to do with anything I read. And then I was like, well, I don't want to give it back to them, so I'll just buy the first issue and whatever. And then I noticed the Energon Universe label on it, and I'm like, oh, okay, so it may have something to do with Transformers. And then as the series unfolded, okay, here we have Jetfire is introduced, and then there's Springer, and then Cobra Commander or Pythona, whatever, So as I read through the series, it got more interesting, and it got a lot cooler with the addition of all my favorite characters from those other series. So I can't wait to see how this ends and how everything ties together, because it's a pretty cool story. So maybe next month, maybe the month after, maybe not for a long time. Who knows? Usually I'm wrong, so. Okay, next up, as you may know, is the Ninja Turtles. 3 issues this month, all different kinds, and some really good stories here. I really like this one. So the first one up is issue number 2 of the Turtles of Grayskull, which is the He-Man Ninja Turtles crossover. So in this one, to start off the issue, the Turtles and He-Man are trapped in an arena where they've been captured, and they're facing off against a horde of Triceratons that want to take them out. So the battle ensues, and of course, He-Man, with his impressive power, shocks the Turtles with how easily he handles the Triceratons, basically whipping them around like they're friggin' little tiny marbles, right? So as the action is all going on, the Turtles and He-Man talk and stuff and try and figure out what the hell is going on, and kind of explain to each other about themselves a little bit. And after dispatching the Triceratons, the people running the arena get pissed, and they're like, send in, what was his name? I forget his name. Monstroid, something like that. It's this big walking monstrosity, robotic / organic thing. And so they're trying to fend this thing off, and they finally get the bright idea, oh, maybe there's a parking garage under the arena. Let's fucking, and they blast down and find a vehicle, and they escape on it. At the same time, Renette, the time traveler that Mikey's in love with, or master of time, timekeeper, whatever the fuck she is, she shows up and is like, guys, you got to stop getting along. There's a time knot going on, and you guys are involved in it, and we need to separate it. You guys need to basically not know each other to begin with. Things are bad. So she basically steers them away from the arena, and they start talking, and she explains that in the future, after the Turtles and He-Man meet up on Eternia, He-Man is turned into a mutant, and a big battle ensues, and basically everybody dies. The Turtles, He-Man, everybody dies. And she's like, we can't have that. We need to stop that from happening. You guys need to never meet. So they formulate a plan, and after hearing the guys explain to her how they got to the arena with the Triceratons, the Turtles explain that they were helping the Neutrinos on planet Neutrino fight off some sort of infestation or attack or something like that, when they went to check something else out, and a neutron ship, I think, passed by. So they're like, ooh, a neutron ship, let's go check that out. They ended up stopping at some sort of station where all these evil people were, one of them the leader of the Triceratons, and that's where they got captured and sent to this arena. Meanwhile, for He-Man, he was in some land doing a diplomatic mission with his mom, and the sorceress appeared to him and said, Skeletor just left Grayskull, in some sort of ship going for wherever, and a collector ship, she called it. And He-Man's like, oh, that's weird. I better slip out and follow him. And then that's when he got nabbed by the Triceratons after going after Skeletor. So Renette comes up with a plan, and she drops He-Man in Manhattan, and she drops the Turtles on Eternia. I'm assuming because He-Man is going to look for Skeletor, and the Turtles are going in Eternia to look for Krang. Because they kind of get mixed up, because basically what happens is, what brings about that future where everybody dies is that Skeletor tries to summon a henchman and instead brings Krang, and Krang and Skeletor work together, and Krang introduces Skeletor to mutagen, and that's what is used to mutate He-Man, and what brings about everybody's deaths, sort of thing. So when He-Man gets to Manhattan, he hits the streets running and goes to find whatever it is he's trying to find, and runs into Bebop and Rocksteady and gets into a skirmish with them. And then near the end, we hear, "You come to my town with a magic sword?" And it's Casey Jones basically standing over Bebop and Rocksteady after finishing them off, and then obviously wanting to have a go with He-Man. And meanwhile on Eternia, when the Turtles are there, they're just amazed that the people there look at them and go, "Huh, Turtles," because Eternia is a little different than Earth, and so they kind of feel like, "Oh, we're fitting in here." But then they get confronted by, I think, is it She-Ra? And Man-at-Arms, some of He-Man's allies, saying, you know, "What are you guys doing here, you weirdos," sort of thing. So in each land, the heroes are being confronted by these people that should be on their side, but they just don't know it because they don't know who the hell they are, sort of thing, right? So, and that's how the issue ends. So I can't wait to see what comes next, because it's kind of a cool crossover. I love all the action. I love the art in this one too. It's really neat. And usually these little sub-series like that either go for like 4 or 5 issues. So I'm guessing we still have, 2 to 3 issues to go before this whole thing is wrapped up. But either way, the Turtles have been doing some amazing crossovers with so many different franchises, and this is just another example of a good one. And I love the cover for this issue 2 of the Gray Skull one. The one they didn't put that one in my bin this month. I had to go look for it. They must have forgot. And so there was a whole bunch of issue 2s, and I found the first couple covers, and I was like, "Oh, that one's good, that one's good." And then there was just, I think, 1 or 2 of these ones at the very back that I kind of stumbled upon at the end, and I'm like, "Oh my God, this is the winner." So you'll see it more when I post the picture, but it's a really neat cover. I really like it. Next up, the Saturday Morning Adventures, number 19. In this one, April O'Neil is at a repository in New York where hordes and hordes and hordes of gold is being kept safe. And the head scientist, nerd, whatever, at the place is basically saying to April, "We have the most advanced security system around. We have, floor panels, we have lasers, we have, I forget what else they had. And if all that fails, we have Greg." And they're like, "What the hell is Greg?" So he's basically issuing an open challenge to any criminal to come try and get his gold, because you're not going to get it. This is too tough for any criminal out there. So the Turtles are watching this on TV and have a conversation with Master Splinter, like, "Oh my God, of course somebody's going to try and steal the gold." So Splinter's like, "Why don't you guys just go stake the place out the next few nights and see if anything happens until we're comfortable that, nobody's going to take this chance." So they're hanging out, and they're like, "Oh, we're bored. Nothing's happening." And then all of a sudden something does happen. Bebop shows up and breaks through the gates and breaks into the building and is going to make a push for the gold. And he's going for the gold because Krang can use the gold in some of his devices to line something, I can't remember what it is, in an effort to get Shredder back from that kind of half limbo state that he's been in for the last number of issues. So that's why they're trying to go for the gold. But when Bebop gets in there, he finds that old Hob has already beaten him to it, beaten the security, and is already nabbing some gold. But then, of course, the turtles shuffle in after because they saw Bebop go in. So it's this big kind of kerfuffle with Bebop, Hob, and the turtles. So in the skirmish, Hob manages to eventually slink out with some gold, while the turtles continue to engage Bebop, which brings the attention of Greg, this last-ditch security measure that this guy mentioned. And Greg is actually a robot, and he looks a lot like Shredder, an Egyptian-style Shredder, it looks like. And so the turtles have to engage Greg and shut him down before they can, send Bebop packing and get out of there after a job somewhat well done, I guess, because Hob did get away with some gold. So in the end, we see Bebop return to Krang, and we see Krang being like, holy fuck, being like, you were there? You had the distraction with Hob, you had the distraction with the robot, and you couldn't even nab at least 1 bar of gold? You fucking stupid pig man, right? But then all of a sudden Hob shows up in the doorway to Krang's lair and is like, well, maybe we can work together because I hear you got something I'm interested in, dimensional portals. So I'm assuming the next issue is going to be Krang and old Hob working together to bring Shredder back from his kind of limbo. And also, if you remember, old Hob just managed to sneak through a dimensional portal with the turtles when they escaped the last time they had a skirmish with Hob and his allies. But Hob's mutant allies got left behind. So he wants to get them back is what I'm assuming this trade-off is going to be. So, and that's where that issue ends. Last up, issue number 4 of the regular ongoing Turtles series. Now, if you remember correctly, the first 3 issues all focused on a different brother. I think it started with Raph, then went to Mikey, then went to Leo, and now we're on Donnie. Donnie's situation is a lot worse than the other 3. He's almost on his last legs, it seems. He's suffered a lot through all of his time traveling that he's done. And basically he's withered away. His limbs are super skinny. He says his bones ache all the time. He's got headaches all the time. He's got no energy. He can't think. So he's really suffering from what all these experiences he's gone through has kind of done to his body and mind. And he says, I think the only place left to go to find any answers is back home. So we see him at the 150-mile mark into New York City. So he's returning to New York. But on his way, he stops, or he passes by a gas station and sees this truck, and all of a sudden hears stuff like "help me," whatever, and he checks it out, and there's a bunch of mutants like him trapped in the back of this truck. And as he goes to try and save them, somebody sneaks up on him and sedates him, and he's added to this mix. So basically, when he wakes up, he's in this facility somewhere in the deep south, it says, where mutants are kept in pens and people pay to come and fight with them, sort of thing. So, but basically Donnie has taken it upon himself to protect all these other mutants and try and bait all the people that come to fight mutants into choosing him, because they get to pick which one they want to fight, so that he can protect all of his other mutant friends. But while he's also doing this and fighting these guys, he's also paying attention to everything that's going on in this compound. When the guards go on break, when they the days where they have big meals, so they're a little slow afterwards, how long it takes them to charge their tasers up, all these little clues that will help him when he chooses to plan an escape, help him get out of there and coordinate everything perfectly. So so that goes on for a while until one day, all of the people that Donnie has kicked the shit out of over the course of, I don't know, weeks or months, I don't know how long this has been, show up all together, and they all want a piece of him. So Donnie's like, oh shit, it's everybody. So this happens, but with all of the people there, Donnie chooses to make this his moment, because there's going to be a lot more confusion with that many people trying to fight him versus just one person. So that's when he chooses to make his plan to escape, and he engages it, and it works. And along the way, he has to dispatch the 2 guards, all the people that came to fight him. And just about when he's finished mopping up all these people, that's when the other 3 turtles show up and they're like, yeah, come to save the fucking day. Oh, the fighting's already done, right? So that's kind of where things end off almost, is with the turtles and Donnie making tracks from this place along with these other mutants. Everybody's free to go. But the issue ends off with a couple panels where the mayor is like, we're going to clean up this mutant scourge. We're going to make this city safe again. And all you see when it flashes to who he's talking to, we see like wanted signs of the turtles, and then we see just a sea of foot soldiers. So he's now got foot soldiers on the payroll as the city's, I don't know, security force or something like that. And obviously they're gunning for the turtles as well, probably, as any other mutants they come across along their extermination effort, let's say. So it's not looking good for the turtles. But if there's anything I've learned over the years, it's that don't count those 4 brothers out. They're crafty. They're crafty. Okay, next up, Transformers, and we have just one lonely issue this month, number 14. In this one, it starts off with what looks like a group of mercenaries working on something, and we don't know what it is at first, and then finally they're done. When we see the results of their handiwork, we see Starscream's torso attached to a Cobra Hiss tank. So he's got new legs, so to speak. So now, of course, when Starscream comes to, he's like, what the fuck? And he starts swatting at the humans, and they're like, ho, 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 Kojak. Like, don't get mad at us. You fell into lava, your legs were all burnt off, we saved you. And Starscream's still like, well, fuck you. And they're like, oh, don't try and exterminate us just yet, because, you know, if I die, there's something linked to my heart in this controller that is going to blow you up. If I die, you die too. So they kind of basically take Starscream and his services hostage in that way. So eventually Starscream settles down and is like, okay, we'll work together, whatever. So they set off. And suddenly they hear some screaming from nearby, so they go to investigate it. Now, as they're on their way to investigating these noises, Starscream has some like flashbacks of the early days of the war on Cybertron, when him and Megatron are hunting down Autobots, and they take 3 or 4 of them hostage, and Megatron gives them a chance to turn to the Decepticons and they'll be spared. And obviously they refuse, and Megatron transforms into his gun mode, and Starscream grabs them, and Megatron's like, okay, take him out. And Starscream's like, but they're captives, they're prisoners of war, like I can't do that, that's wrong. And Megatron's like, do it, you motherfucker. So he's got some sort of weird mental telepathy power over Starscream to kind of really bully him and get him into doing things. So eventually Starscream does off these Autobots, and he feels terrible for it. And then we see over the course of years where he just does it more and more and more and more often, where it becomes regular. And I think this is showing how Starscream became the kind of savage, evil doer that he is, right? Which he obviously didn't start out as. So now back to current times, and they find the source of this noise, and it's Astrotrain, who Beachcomber kind of chained up earlier in this series. And Starscream's like, Astrotrain, like, what are you doing all tied up? What's going on? And Astrotrain's like, Soundwave promised me we'd get linked back up with Megatron. And Starscream's like, Soundwave lies. He can't promise you that, blah, blah, blah. So Starscream is at odds with Soundwave, obviously. And he convinces Astrotrain of this and brings Astrotrain over to Starscream's side. And as all this is going on, suddenly a chunk of Cybertron falls through the portal in the sky and crashes into the lake or ocean or whatever it is, and creates this tidal wave. So Astrotrain transforms into his space shuttle mode. Starscream and all the human mercenaries get on and they blast off. And as they're flying above the tidal wave, the Combaticons kind of come out of it. So Starscream is able to save them. So he brings on them. So Onslaught, Brawl, Vortex, Blastoff, and Swindle have joined, and as they talk over what's going on, Soundwave's plans, and blah blah blah, the Combaticons pledged their services to Starscream as well. So we've got the 5 Combaticons, we got Starscream and Astrotrain all on the same page, and they run into some turbulence, and the humans get bounced around a bit, and the one guy loses the control for Starscream and is worried that they're going to do something. So he's like, "Oh, give me that controller. I'm the boss here. Don't remember who you work for." And Starscream's like, "Oh, I don't think so." And then one of the mercenary girls, like, shows like she took the batteries out of the thing or whatever. And it's like, "They promised us this and they promised us that, so I took the batteries out. Everything's gonna be fine." And then Starscream's like, splat to the girl, right? He's like, "Yeah, y'all fucked," right? So then they basically, as the issue ends, we see the Decepticons celebrating and right after they exterminate all of the human mercenaries, save for one guy, the guy that can make sketches, because Starscream's like, "You're gonna sketch my conquest for me, so start working right now." So the guy starts like drawing Starscream, and that's how the issue ends. So I can't wait to see what happens next, because with the Combaticons entering the fray, I'm pretty sure we're going to see Bruticus at least make a brief appearance and probably cause a lot of shit. And I love it when combiners and Transformers cause shit. Yes, I do. Last up, as usual, G.I. Joe. We got 2 issues today. The first one is number 1 in a brand new series, which kind of piggybacks on all of those 5-issue sub-series that I finished off more recently. Like, there was one for Cobra Commander, one for Destro, one for Scarlet, one for Duke. Am I missing one? Can't remember. But this picks up kind of right where all of those ones leave off in the early days of G.I. Joe. So basically, we see Duke along with Clutch, Rock and Roll, Stalker, CoverGirl, and Baroness. I don't think I'm missing anybody. In the middle of a training mission where they're using jetpacks to kind of get the drop on their enemies and do some maneuvers, but it doesn't go well. Baroness's jetpack malfunctions. She almost dies. Duke saves her. She's like, "This is shit. You guys don't have great tech, whatever. Like, what the fuck are we supposed to do?" And Duke's like he doesn't want to agree with her, but he's like, "Yeah, we're behind on the tech deal compared to our enemies, right?" And you'll notice I'm mentioning Baroness is working with the Joes, and you'll remember at the end of the Duke series he was taken captive, and in the bottom of the pit in the cells, and Baroness was also down there. But when they got attacked, they freed her and she came with them. So she's kind of been recruited to the Joe team, but she's obviously the one who's most resistant and most critical of it, sort of thing. So after this kind of failed mission, we see 2 things. We see Duke kind of giving a briefing about what the purpose of this team is. Like, we are around to combat, bad guys that are using tech, high class tech to take out their nefarious schemes across the world. And he said Mars is a problem, and Destro's company, and also recently the transforming robots have been an issue, and it looks like some of their tech has just dropped in our backyard here. And it shows in that last issue of Transformers I was talking about, when the big hunk of Cybertron fell into the ocean or whatever. This is what Duke's talking about, and he shows it on the screen, this big chunk of Cybertron. He says, "A big piece of their tech recently came into our possession, and we've taken a sample of it, and it's been moved to a facility. And our job, our first mission together, is to protect this tech." Meanwhile, Cobra Commander and Destro are also watching this Cybertron tech, and Cobra Commander is like, "Destro, I'm tiring of your nonsense. All you do is produce guns. You don't do anything special. You're not helping us move forward." And Destro's like, "Oh yeah, check this out." And he hands Cobra Commander a gun, and it's been built so that it can handle energon. So it's basically like a laser gun now, and it's super powerful. So Cobra Commander's like, "Oh, maybe you are useful after all, right?" So That's what we see from the Cobra side of things. Now, fast forward to the Joes. They are now in this facility protecting this piece of the Cybertron tech, and things are all quiet and boring, and Baroness is complaining about that. Well, don't complain about it being boring, because all of a sudden it's not boring. A helicopter shows up, starts causing havoc outside the facility. A bunch of Cobra troops enter and are on their way to grab this tech and engage the G.I. Joe forces. So all of a sudden a big firefight breaks out, but these Cobra troops have the Energon rifles now, right? So the Joes are outnumbered and also outgunned. So they're doing their best to protect it, and they're trying to get the shard away from Cobra. And right at the end of the issue, the last panel we see is Rock and Roll basically sacrificing himself to help his comrades get the job done. And he gets lit up by about 15 laser guns. Like, we just see this big bright, like, Rock and Roll kind of silhouette with all these lasers going through him. So things got grim right off the hop in this one. So but I really liked it because it kind of, it's early days of G.I. Joe, so we get to see kind of this origin story. Not that it's the legit origin story, but it's a version of the origin story. And that it piggybacked on all those other sub-series I kind of like, because it brings in elements of all those stories. It's really kind of cool. I saw this issue advertised last month or the month before, and I'm like, oh, a new Joe series. I wonder what they're going to do with that, right? Well, now I know, and knowing is half the battle, as they say, right? Last up, issue 311 of the current ongoing Joe series. So in this one, there's a couple different things going on. Zartan and the Dreadnoks are still racing to get Baroness to the hospital after she was shot in the Springfield skirmish. They get her there, they get her in. Zartan poses as Cobra Commander, because he is the master of disguise, to get her in and get them working on her and get her saved. So that's what's going on that side of things. And the Joe team, including Snake Eyes, Storm Shadow, Scarlet, I think is there, are like standing by saying, you know what, we got you if anything goes awry, don't worry, we'll be here to get you out of here, cover you, whatever, right? But the main portion of this story is between Cobra's troops, Cobra Commander's troops, and Serpentor Khan's mutant troops. And as you know, Cobra Commander was trying to lure Serpentor Khan's mutant cyborg troops into the athletic fields in Springfield to try and spring a trap on them. So it's not going that well, and Cobra's forces are dwindling. So at the end, Cobra Commander, or the fake Cobra Commander that's posing as him, does a desperate maneuver to try and show that, they're not up to something. They're not leading his Serpentor Khan's forces into a trap. So he kind of, in just one his tank with Cobra Commander and a couple of Rattlers, they engage the mutant cyborgs, and just enough to continue bringing them towards the athletic fields. And once all Serpentor Khan's troops are there, Cobra Commander gives the order to spring the trap. So all these jets fly in and start razing the area and killing all these mutant cyborgs. And Cobra Commander is ecstatic. But then all of a sudden the tides turn, and a bunch of Night Ravens come in on the heels of Cobra Commander's planes and start shooting his stuff down. And it's Cobra Khan and his forces, because in previous issues, once they figured out what Cobra Commander's plan was in Springfield, they scrambled their fighters and they left Cobra Island to come help out and foil Cobra Commander's plan. So they begin that process in engaging Cobra Commander's forces and trying to minimize the damage of this trap that Cobra Commander sprung. So the fighting gets worse and worse. And then as the issue is about to end, we see one more party enter the fray. Destro and his forces from Mars show up to take on Serpentor Khan and kind of supplement Cobra Commander's troops. And Cobra Commander's like, what? Destro's coming to help me? Like, what the fuck's that all about? And one of the Televipers or whatever is like, well, should we talk to them and maybe work together and have a truce or whatever? And but it doesn't matter, because it looks like Destro wants Serpentor Khan's ass anyways, as he personally gets on one of his little personal flyers and goes after Serpentor Khan. And right as the issue ends, we see these two powerhouses about to square off on the streets of Springfield. So I feel like this battle of Springfield, this trap that Cobra Commander wanted to spring. I feel this storyline is about to reach its conclusion. If not next issue, then probably the one after that. I feel that the end is near. So I'm very curious to see, now that everybody's in Springfield, the Dreadnoks, the Joes, Cobra Commander's forces, Serpentor Khan's forces, Destro and his Mars forces, what all comes out of the aftermath of this big skirmish, right? Does everybody just like look at each other at the end and like go their separate ways and say, okay, we did enough here today, let's fuck off? Or does the fighting still continue until people start retreating or everybody's wiped out? Like, I'm very curious to see. And like, what of the mutant cyborgs now that they're on the mainland and in Springfield? Like, where does all this end up? Where does it go? So I can't wait to see what happens in the next issue, and of course the issues going forward after that. So it's been a great month of comics. I hope you enjoyed. I'll be back in the new year with hopefully just as much interesting stuff, if not more. Peace.
Meow.